Something extraordinary is happening in Hollywood.
First off, I want to thank God.
I'm up here to say thank you to God for giving me this ability.
And I have to thank God.
Thank you, God. Thank you for this blessed life.
Celebrities are growing more and more outspoken about their faith.
I do not deny my faith. That's an even bigger sin. It's not popular in my industry, but I cannot deny my faith.
In an industry that is often hostile to Christianity, these stars have had radical encounters with Christ, and it's completely changed their lives.
Ultimately, I believe that suffering leads to salvation.
And, when I heard the jail doors close behind me, I started praying right away.
He would look at us and say, you don't have to live like this.
These aren't your classic, perfect Christian stories. They're messy, real, and brutally honest.
If I could go back and do a lot of things over, I would, and I know that I can't.
Now is the time to be courageous.
And that's exactly what makes them so powerful. These celebrities are discovering that their most important role isn't the one they play on screen, it's the one they play in their own spiritual journey. Curious to hear how it all happened? Let's dive in. From Ace Ventura to The Mask and all the way to Bruce Almighty, there's hardly anyone who hasn't cracked up at Jim Carrey's rubber-faced comedy. His wild expressions and manic energy have made him one of Hollywood's most beloved actors. But behind all the laughter and the silly faces, Jim Carrey was holding a pain that may have led him right into the arms of Jesus. And to understand how one of Hollywood's funniest men found faith, we'll look at the darkest moment of his life. It all started back in 2015 when his girlfriend at the time, Catriona White, sadly decided to take her own life. Jim was beyond devastated, and things got even worse when Catriona's family blamed him for her death. And though he was later proven innocent in court, the experience left him broken and searching for meaning. That's when something miraculous happened. Instead of letting bitterness take over, Jim found himself drawn to Jesus.
Ultimately, I believe that suffering leads to salvation. We make one of two decisions. We either decide to go through the gate of resentment, which leads to vengeance, which leads to self-harm, which leads to harm to others, or we go through the gate of forgiveness, which leads to grace.
This discovery changed everything about how Jim saw the world. He even started painting pictures of Jesus, trying to capture something special in his art. Now he talks openly about how finding Jesus helped him heal and find purpose again.
He suffered terribly, and he was broken by it to the point of doubt and a feeling of absolute abandonment, which all of you felt. And then there was a decision to be made. And the decision was to look upon the people who were causing that suffering with compassion and with forgiveness.
Today, Jim Carrey stands as a fully healed man, proving that sometimes our hardest moments can lead us to our greatest blessings, even for someone who built their career making other people laugh. Few Hollywood transformations are as dramatic as Mark Wahlberg's journey from troubled teen facing prison time to devout Catholic movie star. And getting there wasn't easy. But before we dive into Marky Mark's faith transformation, I want to thank our sponsor, Body Surf. They're a beach lifestyle brand founded by Christians who just wanted to help people spend more time outside and less time glued to a screen. So check them out at shopbodysurf.com. Okay, back to Mark Wahlberg. For Mark, growing up as the youngest of 9 children in a working-class Boston neighborhood, Wahlberg's early life was marked by struggle and rebellion.
My father was a teamster and truck driver. My mom worked odd jobs. Because my parents worked so hard just to provide, I had a lot of time to myself, and most of that time I spent running around the streets, getting a street education.
This so-called street education would lead him down a dangerous path that culminated in a pivotal moment that would change his life forever.
I left school at an early age. I quit school at 13. Ended up getting into a lot of trouble, being incarcerated, tried as an adult at 16, 17. And that was a big wake-up call for me.
It was behind those prison walls that Wahlberg first began seriously engaging with his faith, though he recognizes now that this was just the beginning of his spiritual journey.
A lot of people go to God, especially when they get in trouble. And, when I heard the jail doors close behind me, I started praying right away. But I knew that that was just the beginning for me because I knew I really wanted to turn my life around.
Now, this transformation didn't come without its fair share of challenges. Staying true to his new path meant making difficult choices, particularly in his old neighborhood.
It was also difficult for me because I still lived in the same neighborhood. I still had to go from my house to the train station to go to work. And, I had to pass all my boys on the street and, I couldn't run with them anymore. And then, if I wasn't with them, I was against them.
Today, Wahlberg sees his success in Hollywood not as his greatest achievement, but as a platform to live out his faith and really make a difference in people's lives.
If I could go back and do a lot of things over, I would, and I know that I can't. So I think the way that I can kind of continue to give back and to do things for other people, and especially for the less fortunate, because again, I've been blessed in so many ways, and I think, obviously with those blessings comes a lot of responsibility. And I welcome that responsibility, and I look for ways to give back and influence people and inspire people to go out and do great things.
For Martin Scorsese, the journey of faith began on the streets of Little Italy and in the halls of a cathedral, a journey that would eventually shape one of cinema's deepest explorations of spirituality. And unlike many celebrity faith stories, Martin's isn't a dramatic conversion. It's been a lifelong struggle between doubt and belief. His early years were shaped by two contrasting worlds: the rough streets of New York's Lower East Side and the sacred space of his church.
In New York, there was, it was a rough area. It was a very, very difficult place. It was street tough, very much so. At that time was the American phenomena of the juvenile delinquent, gang wars, and that sort of thing.
A pivotal moment came with the arrival of a young priest who would change his perspective on faith and life.
What he did was represent a way of thinking and a way of dealing with life that was very, very different from a kind of harsh, judgmental, cruel world that I was living in. He would look at us and say, you don't have to live like this.
This early influence led Scorsese to briefly consider the priesthood, though his path, as we all know, would ultimately lead elsewhere. Throughout his filmmaking career, Scorsese's exploration of faith has been relentless. In movies like The Last Temptation of Christ and Silence were, in fact, vessels through which Scorsese managed to deepen his own spiritual dilemmas. For me, faith is a question. It's a question that I don't think is ever answered on many levels. First, on the most basic level, what we believe in will never be verified, so to speak. I've come to understand that faith and doubt are inseparable. It's the constant response to this incredible mystery that we're living, the mystery of just being. These days, Martin's working on a TV series about saints, but it's not all history lessons. He's choosing to tell these stories like the action-packed adventures they really were. Take Saint Joan of Arc, for example, a teenage girl who led armies into battle, or Saint Maximilian Kolbe, who saved people's lives in a concentration camp. I think it started with people just telling stories of men and women who did extraordinary things with extraordinary people, who stood up to injustice and cruelty and risked their lives to help other people. After a career spanning half a century, Martin Scorsese continues to be fascinated by questions about God and faith. And maybe that's what real faith is all about. Not having all the answers, but never stopping asking the questions. It's amazing to see how God works in different ways to reach different people. Remember The Hills? Spencer Pratt and Heidi Montag were reality TV's most controversial couple, but their journey from fame to faith, and now to starting over from scratch, might make you think twice about judging someone's spiritual path. Spencer Pratt and Heidi Montag used to have it all: the mansion, the crystals, the designer clothes. But after losing their fortune due to excessive overspending, they found something money couldn't really buy, and that's a real relationship with God. But just when they thought they had rebuilt their lives, the unthinkable happened. They lost their home in the devastating Pacific Palisades fire.
Spencer was like, grab anything you want to keep. And I was like, how do you choose? Like my brain actually stopped working because I was so overwhelmed with so many things you can't replace. So I grabbed my kids' teddy bears.
And the hardest part? They weren't even insured. Like so many Californians, they'd been dropped from their policy.
We were house poor, as they call it. Like, we have a house, and everything else is a hustle, is a grind. So yeah, we're definitely counting every dollar.
But through it all, their faith hasn't wavered. And when people question whether their Christianity is real or just another PR stunt, Heidi's response remains the same. In 2016, she told People magazine, "Because of God, I was able to rebuild and refocus. I try to prioritize prayer time every day, at least once a day, Try to listen to all the Christian music I love and preaching every day and just keep it part of my daily life. Because if you don't keep it part of your daily life, it slowly kind of slips away from you. For Spencer, who used to be reality TV's favorite bad guy, being a Christian isn't always easy. These days, they're taking things one day at a time, trusting that God has a plan even when everything seems lost.
I think in life it's important for us to pray and to prioritize God's timing in our lives and not compare it to other people's, because we're all different and we all have different things going on and different priorities and different purposes in life.
Sometimes it takes losing everything to find what really matters. And while plenty of people still doubt if Spencer and Heidi are genuine, their story shows us that God's grace can find us anywhere, even in the ashes of what we've lost. From making us laugh in movies like Deuce Bigalow to voicing cartoon characters that our kids love today, Rob Schneider has been around Hollywood for a long time. But in 2023, at age 60, he surprised everyone by announcing something nobody saw coming. He had turned to Christ. What made this funny man turn to faith? His family.
That I'm having a second chance at, to be the father, be a better father this time, a more present father, to see the rise of evil in the world, and to be concerned about that, and to know that now is the time to be courageous.
But here's what's really interesting. Rob says it wasn't just the bad stuff that led him to God. It was also seeing how strong faith made other people, especially his wife Patricia's family.
Catholicism and Christianity in Europe has declined, but in South America it is still very strong. My wife's from Mexico, and there is a real strong faith in Christianity that has not diminished. And I think it's because life is hard there, and I think there is a necessity for hope and for strength.
These days, Rob's faith is changing how he looks at everything, even his comedy. He's thinking about cleaning up his stand-up routines and making more family-friendly movies. He's even working on a movie about Jesus's burial cloth.
Whatever silly movies I've made, and for whatever reason people seem to think anything I say is interesting or funny. I guess people call it a platform. I don't know what you call it. I wanted them to, if you are thinking about looking for something in life, a foundation that isn't in sand where it could be blown away.
Rob's found something pretty simple but powerful in Christianity.
There are other religions out there that say, well, kill your enemy, hate your enemy, and there are infidels. And we have a religion that says love your enemy. Love thy neighbor as thyself. I think that's love others. And what a beautiful way to go through life.
At 60 years old, Rob Schneider is proof that it's never too late to find faith. After all, would have thought that one of Hollywood's goofiest comedians would end up becoming such a serious believer. Jim Carrey found Jesus after hitting rock bottom, turning his pain into powerful paintings of Christ. Mark Wahlberg went from prison cells to prayer rooms, making his faith the foundation of everything he does. And Martin Scorsese spent his whole career searching to understand God through his movies, showing us that sometimes the biggest questions lead to the deepest faith. Spencer and Heidi learned that sometimes you have to lose it all to find what really matters. Rob Schneider shocked everyone by becoming Catholic at 60. If you enjoyed these stories of transformation, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And we'd love to hear your own story in the comments below. Maybe you've had your own unexpected encounter with faith, or maybe you're still searching. Either way, this community is here for you. From Hollywood Hills to prison halls, from rock bottom to red carpets. One thing's for sure, God is always on the move.